How people lived during the Black Death, surviving history's deadliest plague. Welcome to the disgusting forgotten history, where we reveal the harsh truths behind humanity's darkest moments. Today we present how people lived during the Black Death. Stay with us to discover the brutal reality of surviving history's most devastating pandemic from those who endured it firsthand throughout. First, the arrival of death. The year 1348 began like any other in the medieval town, with merchants opening shutters and craftsmen lighting forges beneath cloudy European skies. Trading ships docked at bustling ports carried more than exotic silks and spices from distant eastern lands, bringing invisible death that would decimate entire populations. Within days of the first ship's arrival, dock workers developed grotesque swellings in their necks, armpits and groins that darkened to horrifying black buboes. Fever consumed victims rapidly as their bodies erupted in painful lesions, blood pooled beneath skin creating dark blotches, and delirium preceded agonizing death swiftly. Medieval physicians had never witnessed such virulent contagion, their humoral theories and bloodletting treatments proving utterly useless against the relentless bacterial onslaught spreading everywhere. Panic seized communities as neighbors who shared meals together in the morning lay dead by evening, their bodies already stiffening in death's embrace. Church bells tolled constantly for the dead, their mournful clanging becoming the soundtrack of everyday life as mass graves were dug beyond town walls. Second, daily life amid pestilence. Mourning routines transformed into survival rituals as families burned aromatic herbs, believing smoke would purify contaminated air that supposedly carried the invisible miasma causing plague. Markets that once overflowed with produce and livestock stood nearly empty as terrified farmers refused to enter plague-infested towns despite economic desperation mounting. Those brave enough to venture outside wrapped cloth soaked in vinegar across their faces, avoiding physical contact while conducting necessary business transactions hurriedly. Homes became prisons where families quarantined themselves, barring doors against neighbors and watching loved ones succumb to fever while feeling utterly helpless throughout. Children played in empty streets where corpses lay uncollected for days, their innocent games occurring amid scenes of unimaginable horror and decomposition everywhere. Wealthy merchants abandoned grand houses filled with fine tapestries and carved furniture, fleeing to remote countryside estates, hoping distance would provide safety from contagion. Poverty-stricken families crammed into single rooms faced impossible choices between starvation and risking exposure to the plague that lurked outside their flimsy doors. Third, desperate remedies and false cures. Physicians wearing bizarre beaked masks, stuffed with aromatic herbs and spices, moved through infected districts like ominous harbingers, their strange appearance terrifying already traumatized populations. Bloodletting remained standard treatment despite its obvious failure, with doctors draining patients' vital fluids, believing they expelled corrupted humors, causing the mysterious illness ravaging Europe. Poultices made from crushed emeralds, ground pearls and gold dust were applied to buboes by those wealthy enough to afford such useless luxuries. Common folk relied on cheaper remedies including live chickens strapped against swellings, believing the birds would draw poison from infected flesh through mysterious transference. Flagellants paraded through towns, whipping their own backs bloody, convinced that communal suffering would appease an angry god who had unleashed divine punishment. Superstitious treatments ranged from drinking mercury solutions to inhaling latrine fumes, with desperate sufferers trying anything that promised relief from their unbearable agony. Charlatans and fraudsters sold miracle cures made from bat wings, toad venom, and unicorn horn, exploiting fear and grief for profit during catastrophe. Fourth, the breakdown of society. Traditional social hierarchies collapsed as noblemen died alongside peasants, their wealth and status offering no protection against the indiscriminate plague, ravaging all classes equally. Law enforcement vanished as constables and magistrates either perished or fled, leaving towns vulnerable to looting, violence, and chaos without any authority remaining functional. Priests refused to administer last rites to dying parishioners, abandoning their sacred duties out of terror, causing profound spiritual crisis among faithful believers. Families disintegrated as parents abandoned sick children and children fled dying parents, the instinct for self-preservation overriding centuries of moral and religious teaching. Fields lay unharvested as agricultural workers died in droves, leading to famine that compounded the plague's devastation with starvation throughout the European countryside. Currency became meaningless when goods disappeared from markets, and survivors bartered desperately for food using jewelry, livestock, or whatever possessions they still retained. Mass graves overflowed with bodies that stacked like cordwood, covered with quicklime and thin soil layers that barely contained the overwhelming stench of decomposition everywhere. Fifth, survival and adaptation. Survivors emerged from the devastation traumatized but resilient, facing a transformed world where perhaps half the population had perished within mere months of horror. Communities developed crude quarantine practices, marking infected homes with painted crosses and enforcing isolation periods that represented early public health measures, eventually proving somewhat effective. The labor shortage caused by massive population loss paradoxically improved conditions for surviving peasants who suddenly commanded higher wages and better treatment. Architectural changes included wider streets and improved sanitation systems, as survivors recognized connections between crowded, filthy conditions and disease transmission rates observed during outbreaks. Medical knowledge advanced incrementally as physicians began questioning ancient authorities, performing autopsies, and documenting symptoms with unprecedented detail despite religious prohibitions against dissection. Art and literature reflected the trauma with macabre dance, macabre imagery, memento mori symbolism, and dark themes exploring mortality that dominated cultural expression. The Black Death fundamentally reshaped European civilization, ending feudalism's grip, accelerating scientific inquiry, and demonstrating humanity's remarkable capacity to endure unimaginable catastrophe and rebuild. How people lived. During the Black Death reveals the extraordinary resilience of ordinary individuals facing incomprehensible devastation. The disgusting, forgotten history brings you these unvarnished historical truths to honor those who suffered, understand how pandemics reshape civilizations, and appreciate the medical and social progress born from tragedy. If this video impacted you, please like, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe to The Disgusting Forgotten History for more authentic explorations of humanity's most challenging chapters. Remember, understanding our past prepares us for future challenges. Until next time, stay curious about the forgotten truths of history.